Sum total of human knowledge that's available on the internet has doubled since the start of this podcast 8 seconds ago. All of your employees are using the free version of ChatGPT to take a company confidential information and put it into ChatGPT. You're training the AI on confidential information. Now it knows stuff that it shouldn't know, and it might spit that out to somebody else. The goal isn't to hand over the decision-making process to a machine. The goal is to be more evidence-based. Make your decisions armed with all the knowledge that you need to have.
All right, we're live. Welcome to another episode of Life Sciences 360. My guest today is Ben Weintraub. He is the president of InThought Research. Welcome to the show, Ben.
Thanks, Harsh. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I want to ask you, I've been doing some research on the kind of projects you're working on and the stuff you're doing. I specifically want to talk about Infernesis. From what I understand, it's a AI data-driven decision-making platform. Do you want to expand a little bit on what the capabilities are or what you're doing there?
Sure. I don't think it's particularly insightful to say that we're all overwhelmed by data. I'm sure that the sum total of human knowledge that's available on the internet has doubled since the start of this podcast 8 seconds ago.
Mm-hmm.
But it's increasingly difficult for people to use all of this information to make good decisions. And I think that what's interesting about it is that it's not increasingly difficult to find the information. It's increasingly easier to find the information. But how do you know what of it is the relevant facts and opinion and synthesis in order to help you do the right thing? And this is true for anything, whether you're talking about which hotel to stay at when you go on your trip to Dollywood, or if it's how to raise your kids and what foods to eat. But maybe especially true in clinical development of new drugs and devices, which is what we all care about, where the decisions are not just complicated because you've got clinical data, you've got science, you've got medicine, you've got investors, you've got companies, but it's also important because you're trying to address unmet needs and come up with solutions to address some terrible diseases. And so we started to think at InThought, as we were providing hopefully good decision support for biotech and pharma companies, we started to think about, isn't there a better way to keep all of this information organized?
And that's led to the genesis of Infernesis. Is just
so we started about 8 years ago with a spin out of InThought called Infernesis and a technology platform called InVision that helps small organizations, large organizations, and even individuals to gather, organize, and most importantly, communicate huge amounts of information in a increasingly, hopefully, simple way.
Okay. And when you say it helps organizations and individuals, what are some of the business functions or use cases where the platform like InVision comes in handy?
A long time ago, I was teaching a class at a UC San Diego extension, and I was talking about the fact that when you start clinical trials, your drug has a 23% chance of being approved, and then when you get to phase 3, it has a 56% chance. And then I told them that once you submit it for FDA approval, it now has an 80% chance of being approved.
Yeah.
And I also told them that the cost of getting there was $400 million. So that'll tell you how long ago it was, because now it's well over $1 billion. But one of the students raised her hand and said, how can a company spend $400 million and take 10 years to get there and then send the FDA an application that they reject? That's crazy. And I said, yeah, that is crazy, isn't it? And And I said, the reason is because it's not easy. And there's almost always a very delicate risk reward, benefit risk ratio for a new drug like that. And the decisions you make really matter
Mm.
for getting that FDA approval, for then subsequently positioning it to get it reimbursed by insurance, for then maybe even more dramatically for how you educate doctors about the importance of this new drug. I mean, once in a while, it's a no-brainer, like the COVID vaccine, but
Yeah.
sometimes it's not quite so clear, and in fact, I would argue most of the time it's not quite so clear. So that is a very long answer to your question of what choices we think about. We think about anything from phase one till the first year on market. How do companies make good decisions about how to design their trials, to approach regulatory agencies, to communicate with doctors, and to really make the most out of their clinical development programs?
Okay. And so I haven't seen the demo of the product, but just from everything you've said so far, uh, I I can imagine there are different modules or different features within the software where you could, let's say, analyze clinical trial data or analyze some other type of data, whatever topic of interest is for that company. But how have you sort of, or you or your team, how have you integrated AI into this, right? Because from what I understand, it's there's an AI component to it. So, uh, can you explain a little bit about how AI is being used, with some specific examples in InVision?
Sure. And we can talk about the overall impact of AI on drug
Yep.
development. And um, I think there's a lot of potential and not an insignificant amount of fear about how this works. But
Hmm.
if you're thinking about decision making about how to develop a drug, then there's what we've picked up on is a lot of worry that AI is going to come in and replace my job, and not just my job, Ben Weintraub, but their
Yep.
job. And we don't think about it that way at all. We think about how can AI take that sort of drudgery out of your job, make your life a lot easier, to
Hmm.
allow you to think more about the actual decision that you need to make. So AI in our platform elevates the user to free them up from doing a lot of this manual labor that it takes to wade through this huge amount of information. So let me give you
Hmm.
one story about how that works.
Yep.
If you're developing a drug, you want to know, how do other people that are developing a drug for that indication do clinical trials, and what endpoints are they using, and more
Hmm.
importantly, what trials are going on, and um, how long are those trials taking, and are they enrolling okay, or is it hard to find patients, or are patients flocking towards certain trials and not others?
Yep.
And the way you do that is that you go to clinicaltrials.gov and you look to see what new trials have been posted every day. And not only that, but what trials have changed every day.
Hmm.
But the problem is that becomes an all consuming job very quickly, because clinical trials will give you an RSS feed and tell you everything that's changed about the trials that you're interested in. You can use a keyword. That's easy. But 95% of those changes are insignificant. Like they added a new center in Albania. And
Hmm.
maybe you care about that, but maybe you don't. Um, but what I'm sure about is that most of the changes you'll see you don't care about. So what our system does is the AI does that for you. It
Hmm.
asks you, what trials do you care about, and you can tell it a list of drugs, or a list of indications, or a list of sponsors, however you want to define what you care about. And then it'll ask you some questions like, what almost everybody cares when an endpoint changes. Almost
Yep.
everybody cares when a completion date changes, because that means that the timeline has changed for the drug. But not
Hmm.
everybody cares about new sites being added, but some people do. and um, and so you tell it what you care about, and every day it sends you a prioritized list of changes, and you can look at those 100 changes, and the ones you care about should be in the top 10. And then you tell
Yep.
that you do something with the ones you care about, and then it gets better. It learns that you cared about 1, 2, 3, 5, and 9. And then the next day, things that are like that are up at the top, and pretty soon you only ever care about the first 5, and
Hmm.
you can trust the AI and ignore the rest. It's always there for you, and you can, you have it. But the AI is learning what is important to you, and taking the sort of grudge work, drudgery of spending your time looking through those under 95 off your plate. And people love that, because now they're just getting an assist. They're still doing the important part, which is to say why those 5 things are important, but they
Yep.
don't have to worry about wading through the muck to get to them.
Hmm. So this is maybe a little bit off topic. Actually, what you are saying reminded me of one of the projects I did, maybe five, or not, maybe longer than five. It was more like 7 or 8 years ago, for a big pharma, and they had similar problems. I think the PKPD, pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics team wanted to analyze data from different trials for different therapeutic areas. This big pharma built a in-house tool that gets data from clinicaltrials.gov and bunch of other like publications and articles, and they had an offshore team in India that does the review and manually you know verifies every value is correct comparing to the raw data that's in a journal or whatever. So there was a team constantly making sure that the data is accurate. And then the solution that we built in house was just adding like different sorting, searching, like reporting features on top of that. So it was kind of like, think of it like a giant Excel sheet on steroids with like bunch of different analytics on it. But there was no AI. This was 8 years ago. At that time, companies were not like implementing AI. But if somebody did that today, I'm sure they would look at a platform like yours or others, or try to include AI. But it kind of reminded me of the same you know discussions that we were having then. Is, what do you care about? And we were getting clear responses like, I don't care if this changes, but if this changes, I need that cell to be highlighted yellow or blue, because I really care about this. And we had to build those features into that tool. uh, so that's, as you were explaining, it kind of took me down memory lane, because I was thinking
I
about
think
that
that's
project as well.
exactly it. If it's
Yeah.
something that is just mind-numbingly tedious to do,
Hmm.
then AI is almost always the solution to that. I
Right.
think that there's 2 different things that we're working on, and I think the field is working on. One is machine learning. So in order for your example to make sense, there would have to be some feedback loop, so that it
Hmm.
would have the AI would have to be able to see what your choices were and then get better at helping you over time. So it doesn't work so great for one-off projects, but if it's something that it's going to be maintained, it's difficult to envision life without it, even though we've only had it for a few months, maybe a year at this point, but it's quickly
Right.
becoming indispensable. The other thing that we're playing with, and I'm sure your kids are playing with in their homework, and everybody is doing, is natural language processing, and taking big amounts of data and having the AI be able to synthesize and summarize that for you.
Yep.
So that's incredibly important, and we, like everybody else, is doing that. I think that one thing that we're trying to do that may be a little different is you want to break down silos within
Hmm.
a company, and we often see that somebody within the company has the answer to this question, and you want
Yep.
everybody to be able to access that. Maybe they talk to the PI who's leading that trial, and
Hmm.
they have her opinion written down. somewhere. And I can't tell you how many times it's been the case that it's just a matter of, like, the hard part in that is finding that information.
Yep.
And part of that is because people don't know who to ask or how to ask. And if you have an AI where you can just say, what does so and so think about this trial? And it'll process that question and go through and be able to search everything everywhere all at once to find the answer. It'll find the answer.
Mm.
And so natural language processing, to be able to talk in English to the AI and have it be able to find the answer within, our product InVision would be great. But your whole company's infrastructure, that's really important. And people love that idea, that
Yep.
because it's hard to get people to adopt a new system, but if you could just talk to it, that's terrific.
That's a very good example, because I actually had this discussion with somebody else this week, and they are like a head of quality and regulatory for a med tech or medical device company, and they are also experimenting, implementing AI features. So what she was telling me is they have an internal quality management system. The quality management system has 19,000 users, because this company is huge and they keep acquiring a bunch of other companies. So now it's about ballpark 19,000 employees. You're looking at about 30,000 to 40,000 SOPs and documents. But there is, if somebody had to go and find an answer, it's not humanly possible to go in that system. And so you can search with keywords and stuff, but to be able to ask what you're saying in a very contextual way, like what happened in this year to this process, or how many people were hired between this date or this date, or something like that, right? Like finding those kind of answers, it's not easy to do when the system has this much amount of data, where your only option is just whatever features are available. I don't know if that's a good example, but I guess what you're trying to say is that the companies have the data, and if they're not able to get an answer from that data, then maybe they're not unlocking the full potential of that data. Is that a fair statement?
It's a great example, and I'm
Yep.
sure that this isn't limited to drug discovery or healthcare or pharma and biotech. The whole world is figuring out how to ask plain English questions and have an AI deliver amazing synthesis of what's out there. And you'll have experts on your show that are much smarter than me talk about how you need the right training set and how you avoid hallucinations and all sorts of things like that. What I think about a lot is the unique aspects of a healthcare company and what they need to do that correctly. And, since we've been helping companies with their decision support over the last 14 years, we have a pretty good idea of their current system and their challenges and the way that they need to go about this. And so one example of the unique aspects of healthcare is that it's highly regulated. So a lot of the
Yep.
things that an MSL finds out from um, a principal investigator in a trial, you can't put on the company, open to everybody at the company. That needs to be regulated and walled off. And so we're working to build a system that it doesn't just acknowledge that there's private data and that there's a reason for silos. It wallows in that fact. And the AI
Mm,
is going to come back and say, I know the answer to that question, but I can't tell you. But here's the person you need to call over in the European office, and they'll hook you up. And
right.
that's what people really want to know. They want to know that there is an answer to or that that's a topic that's been addressed. Um, and they don't need to, break down all these regulatory barriers and legal barriers. They just need to know the right person to go talk to about it.
Yep. Yep. So yeah, I have a hot take question for you, and I want to see what your answer is. We've been talking about AI and decision making a lot. You even said, people are thinking, oh, is AI going to take my job or whatever? But the hot take question is this: do you think AI is going to make us a better decision maker or worse? What's your take?
Well, I'm optimistic. I have seen one or two movies where AI destroys the world, so I'm
Yep.
not. I have as much fear as anybody about that, but it seems to me that, with the caveat that we have to do this right,
Hmm.
that the goal isn't to hand over the decision making process to a machine. The goal is to be more rigorous about making good decisions, be more
Yep.
evidence based, make your decisions armed with all the knowledge that you need to have. And if you decide to make an irrational decision about that after that, that's great. Do it. I mean, every company has to be unique and have its own niche in the market. If we all made the right decision, then we'd all be doing the same thing. It'd all be the same company.
Yep. Yep.
I'm not trying to argue that AI needs to make decisions. So I can only answer your question, Harsh, which is I think on everybody's mind in the short term, which is that in the short term, for sure, it's going to improve our ability to collaborate with each other, to derive insights from
Mm.
all of this. Soon, we will definitely look back at the first 25 years of this century and think, wow, I couldn't even keep track of my passwords, much less make any sense of all the information that was available out there. I I I really look forward to explaining to my grandkids one day the nonsense about how many passwords we had and that we couldn't remember. They was like, "What are you talking about? I just look
Yep.
at the screen and it knows me. What's a password?"
Right.
This is
Right.
we need to look beyond the sort of nonsense that we're currently dealing with and imagine a world where um, it's easy to we can now search and find the answers to questions.
Yep.
That's a lot different than it was 20 years ago. But in not even 20 years, but in 5 years, we're going to be searching and getting insights, not just a list of answers. And I think that's exciting.
Right, right. That's a really great point. And again, I'm also on the same side. Like I feel like there is a lot of concern about when is the right time to bring in AI, when which process to bring it in, how much of it to bring it, like how many dollars or time or hours need to spend. There's so many questions in people's minds, especially executives and leadership who are looking at doing AI proof of concepts or experiments. I've done a few in quality and regulatory, which is where I do most of my consulting work. So it's a common theme across the board. Is like, yes, there is optimism. Yes, there is this curiosity factor of, yeah, I want to do the experiment, but then there's also this you know uh, fear at the back of the mind. Is like, can I take this? Like, can I go all in? Right? Like, and I see that very few companies are going all in. So it's hard for me to understand, like, what is it going to take for them to go all in. Is it like, are we waiting for the agency or regulators to say, like, yeah, you can use AI, don't worry about it, or give them a guidance of how to use it, or somebody else like a big pharma uses it and tells them, like, hey, look, we used it, go now, you use it. So, and any thoughts you have there? Because that's what I'm seeing, is like people are doing it, but the fear of going all in is still there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things I've heard about AI is that it's changing faster than regulations and
Hmm.
lawyers
True.
and executives can keep up with the implications of it. And that's beyond my pay grade to think about those things. But what we try to be very practical about it. Look, if you want to search clinical trials yourself, you can.
Yep.
Having our machine learning algorithm do it, it's pretty innocuous. It's all public data. There's no concerns there. And I mean, this particular use case, sure, go for it. And that's how I think people should approach AI. They should figure out the problem they're trying to solve and figure out if the use of machine learning or GPT or whatever it is that you're using to make your life easier, if that's okay. And I'll give you an example of when it's not. If if you're a big company and all of your employees are using the free version of ChatGPT to
Hmm.
take a company um, confidential information and put it into ChatGPT and say, write a summary of this, then yeah, if I would that would put up my radar right away. I'm like, okay, you're training the AI on confidential information. Now it knows stuff that it shouldn't know, and it might spit that out to somebody else. So in
Yep.
order to do that, you have to build a training set that's proprietary, and companies are doing that, and that's the correct assumption. I think it also gets around this problem of hallucinations, or at least minimizes it, because you're training it on data that you've already validated. But yeah, I don't think that the right answer is to say, okay, well, because of that, GPT is banned from our company, because we've definitely heard stories that
Yep.
people will
I've
go
heard that.
around it and do it on their personal phone anyway. So it's
Yep.
it's here, but you got to educate people about the yeah. Don't put proprietary confidential information into a chatbot, or it knows it,
Yeah.
and make sure that you enforce that policy.
Yeah, I agree. I want to switch gears and ask you about another venture or project that you're working on. So I think while I was doing research, I also found that you have another venture called Spire Bioadvisors. Is it like a can you explain what you're doing there?
Oh yeah, thank you so much for asking about it. We are very excited at InThought and Infernesis about the prospect of bringing medicines for unmet diseases. And to me, almost all the exciting innovation that's going is from these young companies that are spinning out of um, universities and other research institutions. And they just appreciate the help. They appreciate the point of view of people that have worked with the big pharma companies that they're trying to eventually partner with, and help. And that, for better or for worse, there's some rules to the game. And if you're going to put together a pitch deck, it has to look like this. And if you're looking for funding, these are the right people to talk to. And so we found that it's very rewarding for us to work with some of these early stage companies and help them pair up and meet the right people, and talk about their science and their medicine in a way that helps them accomplish their goals. And so we have been able to help a number of these smaller companies get going, and I'm very proud of that work.
So what when you are helping them, if you were to point maybe one or two biggest challenges that you see over and over with these smaller companies to, as they're getting off the ground, trying to get going, have you come across any common patterns like, oh yeah, everyone's struggling with this? Why? Can you share some, like what's common across?
Well, I guess I'll try to tie it back to the Infernesis
Yep.
information overload story. Science is complicated, and
Mm,
scientists are trained to be very rigorous in explaining their work and the promise of their work, and to talk a lot about the caveats and the downside potential. And so the people that they're talking to, whether it's investors or potential partners or venture capitalists, um, are used to having, I guess, the elevator pitch is the right way to think about it.
yep.
So we just help them to tell their story in a very exciting and efficient way, and they think it's nonsense, and doesn't really capture the full breadth of what they're doing. And but if we can, get them in the door, they can tell their full story, and I think people appreciate that help, and simplifying it down to the kernel of what's really interesting.
Mm. And when you so the types of companies that you're helping at this early stage, uh, are you seeing any trends around uh, companies being formed or trying to develop a product in a specific area, like personalized medicine or cell and gene therapy? Are you seeing any particular area or type of therapeutic that more companies are being formed with the founding team trying to develop a potential product?
That's interesting you mentioned those.
Yeah.
I'm very biased on that because those are the ones we're seeking out to go help.
Hmm.
We are very lucky in that we get to ask the question, what do we think is going to be revolutionary? And then go find companies that are doing those things and say, hey, you guys need any help? Um, and so the, um, the, the idea that drugs are going to become more matched to individual patients is not new, but
Yep.
there are truly exciting things that are happening that are going to make that a reality, both in oncology, where it's been extremely successful over the last 20 years and moving right along, and in other areas where it hasn't been the paradigm, and people will learn from what happened in oncology. You also
Hmm.
mentioned gene therapy and cell therapy, and those are areas that have been frustratingly slow, I think, if you look at the last 30 years,
Yep.
but are definitely making big improvements now. So, yeah, there's tons coming out of academic institutions and startups and young companies and more mature private companies and companies getting ready to go public all across the spectrum. I think the biotech, med device, drug development world is extremely healthy.
Yep.
But you got to tell your story and break through all the noise of everybody else that's got a great idea, and convince people why you really do have the chance of helping millions of patients.
Yeah, definitely. These are again, I mentioned those because most of the clients that I've worked with in the past 24 months are in that area, and I typically work with a lot of startups. So I thought maybe, are you seeing something else that I should be looking at, or the companies that I should be finding? But yeah, I've seen the rise of at least the cell and gene therapy companies in the past 24 months, and it's pretty significant.
I think we're going to look back on the COVID vaccines as hugely important because we validated in a by necessity the the microRNA approach to developing these vaccines, but it's applicable to lots of infectious disease, and it sort of revolutionized the whole infectious disease drug development field. I think it's going to
Hmm.
do more than that. It's going to revolutionize some other areas as well, and it fits in very nicely with the computational and personalized approach to developing therapies, and it's very exciting what people are doing.
Yeah, it's really interesting having a conversation with you. Where do you consume all the information? Because I know you have a really good understanding of the data and the technical challenges, but you also have a lot of information about the scientific side of things. So what do you read? Are there any books, blogs? Where do you consume stuff to stay up to date?
Outside my house, there's a turtle that I like to swim with, and since I'm overwhelmed by information, it helps me to go talk to her and synthesize all that information in my head. That's
Yeah.
a very flippant answer. I think that again, it's not the access to the information is not limiting to me
Hmm.
or to anybody, but what I am very lucky to be able to do is think about that 60,000-foot view on a daily basis. Sometimes I explain to people what I do and what the 30 people that work at InThought do. We might be thinking about cures for Alzheimer's today and then a new drug for toe fungus tomorrow.
Hmm.
And we are experts at nothing, and have opinions about everything.
Yep.
But there are not a lot of people who get to do that in 2024, and so I'm really fortunate to. And sometimes the value that we bring to people is they'll say, I've got this challenge. The FDA doesn't like my endpoint, and I don't know how to design the trial. and we'll say, well, you're working in um, attention deficit disorder, but if you look at what these guys did in non-cell small cell lung cancer, they had this adaptive trial design that might work for you, and that connection is something that people really appreciate because they like I had no idea that that was
Yeah.
even a thing,
Yep.
because it's so far out of their sphere of area. And so the InThought team has the luxury of being able to learn about all of these different therapy areas and then maybe take some knowledge from one and bring it to the other. It's amazing how quickly we're learning how to subset diseases based on what we learned in oncology over the last 30 years and applying that to, I'll give you an example, to psoriasis. So psoriasis was a real problem 15 years ago, 10
Mm.
years ago. And now we have these amazing drugs where 90% of the people who take the drugs have a 90% skin clearance. But that has only uncovered that there's a 10% of patients that have some real problems, and so we're now starting to classify those patients as palmoplantar and pustulosis
Mm.
and um,
See.
face and scalp psoriasis, and really start to ask the question, well, what is the molecular underpinning of their disease that's different? And somebody will say, well, that's exactly what we've done in cancer.
Right.
Yeah, that's right. And you take the learnings from what what's the difference between an aggressive form of lymphoma and a less aggressive form of lymphoma, and some of those ways that you learned that and addressed it become applicable to these other diseases that you don't expect. So, um, if you leave the turtle aside, I would say that the secret sauce at InThought is that we have the luxury of thinking about the big picture all day, every day.
Right. That's really great because and it also applies to a bit of the work that I've seen. So like when I was an employee working in quality and regulatory departments, I wasn't able to stretch my thinking that much because I was working in that one organization and what's happening in their, pipeline or product development lifecycle. And that's, I mean, yeah, I was reading stuff offline, but I wasn't getting to work on anything or talk to people. But then the moment I switched to consulting, now it's like, the world is your library. Like you get people messaging, hey, what do you think about this? Hey, I'm stuck here, can you help me out with this problem? And it's amazing for me because it's a good learning opportunity. I get to learn different things, and b it fulfills my curiosity because now I'm like doing five different things at the same time, different types of projects with different type of clients with different challenges. That was very hard for me to do when I was in. And it's, I think of the same thing, like I feel like I'm fortunate to be able to work with different types of clients and learn. And as you said, okay, hey, well, have you tried this? Because I have another client, they had a similar problem, maybe you could use that solution to solve your problem. And it's a similar reaction, oh yeah, I didn't think about that. So there's a lot of similarities in what you're saying. And it's just, we have the luxury today, especially with technology, with remote work, and whatever you want to put it, to be able to do this kind of stuff, have a consulting practice or be a freelancer or independent consultant, and then just get to work on a bunch of different things at the same time.
Well, I'm very lucky because I was an utter disaster in the lab, and my drove my PI and others crazy because it was some interesting stuff going on, but I'm always more interested in this other thing that's going on over here. And
Yeah.
so I very fortunately fell into something that I enjoy doing.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Listen, it's been amazing talking to you. I love everything, all the conversations that we had. Before we wrap this up, any final thoughts you want to let the audience know where they can reach out to you or learn more about what you're doing at InThought and other companies?
www.inthought.com, and
Yep.
you can find us on LinkedIn as well. And I really appreciate the chance to talk about the big picture. And I will keep my fingers crossed that AI will lead us to better decisions and not take over.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Ben. That's the pod. Thank you, guys. And if you like this episode, please subscribe to us on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. It helps us grow the channel and it helps us bring other awesome guests like Ben to talk about interesting topics. So thank you, Ben.
Thank you.